point where there might be questions and feedback, I'm going to rove with the microphone, and when it's time, I'll have you speak into it so that it'll come across on the recording, okay? But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Joyce.
Seeds of Learning is a fabulous organization. It's very small, which is good because it can sort of be really flexible to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. And it's local. The main office is the only United States office is in Sonoma, and it was started by Todd Evans, who is a UCC minister, and Annie has worked for Seeds of Learning and been the face of Seeds of Learning in the United States for many, many, many years. Mel Davis was the first person from our congregation to go. Betty Maskins, Daphne went, and then she said she gave it to herself for her 60th birthday. And then we sent a group. Peggy Porter was part of the first group that went, and Pat and I were part of the second group that went, and we had a great time. I personally worked one day, slipped on a banana peel and broke my arm, and so my use for the rest of the week was a little limited. And so, but Annie is very organized, always positive and upbeat, and a wonderful face of Seeds of Learning in the United States. And I'll turn it over to her to tell you more about it.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here. I'm very excited to reconnect with this church. It's been, like I said, so Todd Evans, who was the UCC minister who founded Seeds of Learning, founded it in 1991. And in 1994, the first group from this church went. So coming up on 30 years. And then in 1997 and 2001 and 2010 as well. So I'm glad to be sharing a little bit more about what we've been up to, and I'd also, at the end, would love to hear any questions that people have too. So I don't know if, Joyce, would you be willing to advance the slides as we go? There's just in the bottom right corner of the keyboard, you could just. So as Joyce said, we're a small nonprofit. We've been around since 1991. We have our office in Sonoma. Most of our staff is in Nicaragua. We've also worked in El Salvador. Does anybody here go to El Salvador? And we recently have started working also in Guatemala and Oaxaca, Mexico. We have two parts of what we do, essentially build schools and increase access to education there, and cross-cultural understanding. So we realized that a lot of people, didn't know that much about Latin America and really wanted an opportunity to do something hands-on in a way that was constructive. And so people work alongside of community members to build the schools, and that's kind of been our model. So we don't go in and say, and I really enjoyed the sermon today about not kind of coming in and telling people what they need, but rather our staff who lives and works there asks them, what do you need and how can we help you in that process? And so we work side by side. So if you want to go to the next. In Nicaragua, we worked in Ciudad Darío and outside Managua, and we work again, closely with the communities, teachers, students, and the Nicaraguan Ministry of Education. We ask for permission. All of the schools that we build are public schools, and then we ask for permission, and we're granted that from the Ministry of Education to build. So on the right there in the hat is Todd Evans, and Patrick Rickon is he's from Mendocino Presbyterian Church, and he's been living in Nicaragua for over 30 years, and Todd still lives in Sonoma. The way that we got started is they were in Nicaragua, and Patrick was, those of you who went probably remember him, he was just taking woodshop in high school and was there and started realizing that kids were sitting on cement blocks and didn't have any desks. And he said, well, I could probably put together a desk. But that was kind of the critical point. The way he did that from the beginning was with people. And so, word got around that there was this guy from the States and he could help your community build desks. And he said, well, come in and let's build them together. So he used scrap lumber from a Habitat for Humanity mill. That was a small operation because Habitat for Humanity had projects there. And they built these simple desks. And Pat had a moment, like we worked in a community called Playa de Moyua, and they built these desks and they carried them across this lake. The community was on the other side of a lake. And before they even got to the other side, kids started coming down and wading into the water to get a desk for themselves. And I think that was a moment where Pat humbly thought, oh my gosh, if there's this much need, let's keep going, let's keep doing this. And that's how we started that same community. Later, they were meeting under a tree for school, and so in the rainy season it was difficult, and they asked for help building a school, and so that was the first school building that we did. So we have a school infrastructure program, and basically volunteers have spent many. We've had just over 4,800 volunteers who've gone over the last years. So usually it's 10 days or so that people go. To date, we've built 264 educational rooms in 89 partner communities. We say educational rooms because sometimes it's a school kitchen, sometimes it's a classroom, sometimes it's a learning center. Many times we work with the same community year after year. So it's in 89 communities. Now that's across Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala as well. And just some of the quotes, like a lot of the, if there's not a school, there's a lot of reasons that kids don't go to school in Nicaragua, but one of the biggest ones that we're trying to do something about is just adequate conditions. So this is a quote from one of the teachers where we built a school about 5 years ago, and they see enrollment goes up, the enthusiasm about just having a school goes up, and it's led to us building second classrooms and in the same community too. So this is pre-COVID. We used to host between 4, we got up to as many as 25 groups in a year. That was a lot. We've pared way, way down. But we have also, I forgot to mention, we did a couple groups to Puerto Rico. This year, we had a couple groups travel to Oaxaca, Mexico, where we started working with partner communities, and next year we'll go back to Mexico and also to Guatemala. We're thinking about Nicaragua. It's a little bit of a changed political landscape. We may have a group or two go there. We're going to have to wait and see. Like I said, the number of volunteers is just over 4,500 with 279 different groups. Groups have been, like the church has hosted groups. We have open groups. We have school groups. We've had some Annalee and El Molino students go before, and we have had middle schools as well as and family groups. Over 50% of our volunteers are youth. We try to make sure that it's available to any student who wants to go. Some families can pay for the trip, others get scholarships, others do fundraising, so we try to, again, make sure it's as equitable and accessible to everyone who wants to go. We've had a lot of families go. This is one, Ivan, who took his 2 daughters when they were 10 and 12, and I think they had quite an impactful experience. We try to stay away from parents who just want to send their kids so they can figure out what life is really like, because a lot of times those kids, if they don't want to be there, it's difficult. But so there needs to be a little inkling of curiosity and desire on the kids' part to go. And I think what we try to do is meet people, where they're at. And so sometimes that can be just never having traveled abroad, and sometimes it can be people who have quite a bit of knowledge. But our hope is just to help people understand, what conditions are like in a lot of the world, and also in a way that kind of cultivates and inspires respect in them for other people and other ways of living in the world. And we have all kinds of conversations with the students. Sometimes people go and the first thing they notice is, why is there trash everywhere? And we start to talk about the trash system and how it's funded or not funded and kind of the reasons behind things. So we have nightly reflections where the group talks about, things that they notice, what are they uncomfortable with, what's challenging. So it tends to be a pretty transformative experience, I think, for many people. We also have these things called learning resource centers. So what we notice is that a lot of the education is very rote learning. It's like copy, repeat, color inside these lines with these colors. And so what we started doing in 1995 is building what we call a learning center, which is, I think it's the equivalent of a after-school program and maybe like a Boys and Girls Club type of thing. It's a space, and it ranges in size from our main learning center. It has several rooms with dance classes and art and vocational training. And then some of the rural communities, it's just a little corner of a classroom with books. But we wanted to supplement and improve the quality of the education that was happening in the classrooms. So they do everything from playing games to, we can go on to the next slide. There's a chess group. We started a reading campaign, so all the kids are tracking their reading. We're trying to really instill that love of reading. We have a dance classes and music classes. They're learning marimba, guitar, recorder, and bass in some of the classes. So there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of activities that happens in these classes. And there's also, we have computer classes. There's also, I think in the next slide, there's some of the guitar, but we have a scholarship program because we started realizing that a lot of students want to go to school and just don't have the money to go. So whether it's primary, secondary, or university, so we started that program as well. And we have a main center, but we also work in the rural communities. And again, before we work in a rural community, we'll go and we'll have a meeting. And sometimes it's 10 meetings. And one of the first meetings we have is what's important to their community. And sometimes they'll say a health clinic or a church or a school or, more rain for their crops. A lot of these are farming communities. And sometimes we have people go out and collect 3 rocks. And we'll say, okay, put your rocks where you think it's most important, for your community. And we don't respond, water projects, health clinics, churches, we don't, while we recognize those are needs, what we focus on is education. So the needs in education, we say, okay, what can we do? And sometimes it's just a question of communities, they have a school and they say, well, none of our kids can afford to go to high school because they have to take the bus into town and they have to pay for food. So we actually do have a high school scholarship program as well. But we try to, again, work with the communities on where they are and how we could help facilitate the education. We have a lot of, this is a community, an activity in the Learning Center. We have a lot of these community-run meetings. The Learning Center is kind of a hub of activities. We celebrate International Children's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. They did some Christmas celebrations. And one of the things we also really started to focus on, so we started a primary education program, a secondary, and university, and trying to work with the high school and the university students on giving back. So we say, we'll pay for your transportation into town, we'll pay for your food while you're in town, because it's $1 or $2, but it's $1 or $2 less than they have, and we'll pay for your uniform, but we also want you to give back. So they develop what they call social projects. So the high schoolers and the university students develop a give back project to their community. So some of them developed a reading program within their own community, so they participated in the main one and they took it back to their community. Some of them took dance classes in the main center and then they taught dance to the younger students in their community. Some of them did forest reforestation because there had been a lot of trees cut down and they did that. So what we do is we help them make the plan, how are you going to get funding for this? Is there funding that's needed? And then how are you going to execute this? So that skill tends to hopefully serve them also into the future. We do some vocational, this is kind of an exciting one for us. We did vocational training for welding, and there was a woman there who was in a community called Pedro Arauz, And she was the first woman welder in her community. And when she first got out there, everyone, she got kind of the classic, like, what are you doing out here? This is a men's job. Why are you here? And she was like, because I'm going to learn how to be a welder. And she's one of the best welders now. She gets a lot of business, a lot of people who come to her and ask her to do these projects. She's hired other people to start working with her. So that was kind of an exciting thing just for us to see and kind of challenge some of the stereotypes that she was living with. So that's her there. And I think there's one more photo. So as I said, the scholarship program, we usually support anywhere from 60 to 100 students in the scholarship program. So far, we've had just over 1,600 students since it began. It's a hard process because we want to say yes to everyone, but we can't. It's not terribly expensive. It costs us about $50 a month to support a high school student, and they go for 10 months, so it's about $500 a year, and about $25 a month for a primary school student, so it's $250 a year. College is about, and again, compared to college here, it's about $1,000 a year for a university student. So it's it's a lot for them relative to U.S. costs. It's not so much. So this is just this is a picture of the scholarship students, and we've really found that it's made an incredible difference in their lives. When they stick with the program all the way through, and sometimes things come up and they can't, they tend to do quite well. We actually, we had one student who's the director of the health center now in Ciudad del Rio, one student who just got awarded Teacher of the Year in the Department of Matagalpa, which is a rather big department. We've had students work in the mayor's office, so all kinds of things, and we like to think that we were, a little part of their journey as well. Okay, so that is actually the last part. Before we go into, there's a little 4-minute video that shows some of the things that we've done, but I wanted to just also say that the church has been, like I said, if there's more interest ever in going on a trip again, I know that's a huge, it's an international, it's a big feat, but there's also, if people want to know any more part about any of the programs, I'm happy to talk more about that. And yeah, so I think maybe we'll move into the video and then do question and answers. Okay, okay. Or while he's setting that up, does anybody have any questions? I know several of you have gone before too. Yeah.
Do you ever reach out to a Rotary Club, either there in the country or here? We do a lot of international work. I'm on the World Committee Service Committee of the National Rotary Club here. We have a long-standing relationship with rural communities in Puerto Vallarta.
Oh, neat. Yeah. We have.
Where we
Yeah.
actually have members of our club that pay an annual scholarship for students from junior high, high school, and college if they choose to go or trade.
In Puerto Vallarta.
In fact, I just wrote the check last
Oh, wow.
week for my student who's now in her second year at a university.
Oh, neat. Neat. Well, we've worked with some Rotarians on school construction, and I know we've tried for the global, the grants, but we have found that a lot of the local clubs have a long list of, their own projects, but we have never talked to them about supporting some of the scholarship students. So maybe if you think there's any more interest.
It's actually set up by the Rotary Club of Puerto Vallarta Sur.
Oh, neat. Okay.
One of them owns a restaurant and a hotel, and on top of it, when you come into the restaurant, there's a huge rotary wheel up there, and there's a table there telling about their Programa de Becas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was due to one of our church members here who's also in the Rotary Club, when he was president, setting up a program to exchange a teacher from here
Oh, yeah.
Puerto Vallarta Sur.
Yeah.
And that person came here. He now owns the Mexico Lindo restaurant.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's been here for almost as long as I've been, which is 30 years.
Yeah. Well, that would be neat to look into. Yeah.
And we got involved in as a result of that exchange, we got involved in helping building a school in one of the new colonias that I first visited, you went across a bridge across the river, and the vehicles just rode through the bridge.
Oh, yeah. And he built the bridge. Yeah,
Years later, there was a concrete bridge. Finally, the government got around it. Okay, this
to
is
doing it.
part of its
Yeah,
rural,
yeah.
I gather most of these schools are in rural areas.
They're mostly in rural areas, yeah. I mean, it would be great. Maybe we could talk more about if there's a way that Rotary could be involved.
I'd like to get together with you sometime.
Okay, that would be great.
I've got the video ready. I'm not confident the sound is going to happen, so
Okay.
you might want to narrate a little
Okay,
bit if the sound
okay.
doesn't
If
come
it
on.
doesn't, then I'll just narrate.
Times over the last few years, thanks in a large part to your support, Seeds of Learning has not only kept our existing programs going, but has also expanded into other countries. We continue to implement new and exciting projects with high impacts in the lives of thousands of people. Since 2020, we've been working in Guatemala. Last year, we worked with 12 communities in Petén, a remote department with tremendous need for school infrastructure and resources. Some achievements from last year alone include 6 new classrooms, 1 fully equipped school kitchen, a school playground, a computer lab, and even a school stage. We also supported the construction and the improvement of 9 additional classrooms and the distribution of 384 student desks and other school furniture. In Nicaragua, through our support of 10 learning resource centers, by the end of 2022, we had welcomed 28,905 user visits to the centers, 678 students participating in music, dance, computer, arts, and/or English classes. We lent out 1,906 books, and 790 children participated in the reading campaigns. In order to reach more children with our reading campaigns and to promote a love of reading, staff from the Learning Resource Center would visit schools in rural areas to conduct reading sessions that included dramatized storytelling, book displaying and lending, and reading forums and other activities.
Niños se alegran cuando ellos vienen, hay integración, se integran hasta los que poco asisten, ellos se animan, fortalecen su lectura, su autoestima también, porque ellos se sienten identificados con los cuentos, se sienten útil y se sienten valorizados por venir a dar el tiempo que les brindan, el espacio, la dedicación, el esmero para venir a estar al frente de ellos, y las lecturas muy bonitas para que ellos han quedado encantados con este programa de las bibliotecas móviles.
And we supported 99 scholarship students in the Educational Advancement Program last year.
Gracias al programa del SOL logré continuar con mis estudios. Estoy muy agradecida por su apoyo, por haberme brindado su ayuda, ya que sin su ayuda yo no podría estar hasta el día de hoy, que casi ya culminó mi carrera en lo que estoy estudiando. Ya solo faltan 3 meses para culminar y pues realmente me siento muy emocionada porque ya voy a llegar a esa meta que jamás pensé lograrla por mi situación económica.
Thanks to a partnership established with a cooperative of women weavers called Vida Nueva, or New Life, as well as our work with the Oaxacan Street Children Organization and others, we were able to organize a work group program that aligned with our long history of providing meaningful, hands-on cross-cultural experiences in support of education for both North American visitors as well as our Oaxacan hosts. And just about everyone who went wants to go back. For the duration of 2023 and into 2024, our projects include construction of at least 4 more classrooms in Guatemala, the development of a pilot learning resource center in Guatemala, organization of 3 to 6 work groups to visit Mexico and Guatemala, expansion and resourcing of the mobile libraries program in Tipitapa, construction of a classroom to be used as a traditional medicine learning center in Teotitlán del Valle, Oaxaca, further establishment of our programs in Mexico, continued to support 10 learning resource centers in Nicaragua, continuing to support at least 71 scholarship students in the Educational Advancement Program in Nicaragua, and the exploration of repair and updating past projects in El Salvador. Thank you so much for your generous support and for helping us to reach our goal of raising $30,000 in order to accomplish this.
Shopify's point of sale system helps you sell in person at
sorry about that. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense as to what it is that we're doing. Let's see. I think the last part, there's a couple more. Yeah, I think there's just a couple more pictures that show some of the resources and some of the trainings that we've done. But that really concludes the program expansion that we have. Does anybody have any more follow-up questions about how we work, our approach?
I have a question, and then I can hand the microphone to anybody else who has a question. I was interested when you said you're focused on education, but while you're doing that work, other requests come, other development requests, and you've had to discipline yourselves to say, while those are all very real needs, we're on the education thing. I'm just curious, like, I think often those of us who want to help, we might go in with a certain focus, but then there's so much, like, what is it, what does that make possible for you when you decide, well, we could try to address all of these needs, we're going to focus on the education. And I'm also wondering if there are ripple effects that you notice. Like, by focusing on the education, it probably also addresses some other needs in maybe a less direct way, but very real.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and we haven't always been that disciplined. So in 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit Nicaragua, and it wiped out a lot of the country. And we switched gears for a year, and we did emergency housing construction. And we did it kind of with our same community development approach, which is actually really different than an emergency. People were like, we just need a house. Like, we don't need to feel involved in the process. And so we learned that, okay, we can do that, and that was important, but what we know how to do well is education. And if we spread ourselves way too thin, we don't do it the way that we want to do it. But one of the neat things that has come is that when communities work with us, they have to get organized, because we say, great, like, I'm so glad you want a school. How can we make that happen? And we have these meetings, and there's a school construction committee forms, and within that, there's a president, there's a secretary, someone's taking notes. A lot of communities, like, we say, we can help you pay for the construction supplies, but could you put in a little sand? Does anybody have, like, some extra wood we could use for the form boards? And then who's going to work on it? And the community organizes volunteer work days, and that is such an organizing process. So, like, in La Remonta community, I went when I was in high school, actually, and I worked in a community called La Remonta. Well, 30 years later, they now have potable water, they have, they're doing a reforestation project, they have access to a health clinic. So there's organization that happens, and they have more access to other projects. But the short of it is, we just realized to do education well, we had to stay focused on education. But there are some great, I think, side effects of the community working with us and becoming, and not that they didn't have the capacity to become organized, but they didn't have the need to. So when they organized around the school project, they suddenly were soliciting other projects from places that could work with them to build a church, or places that could do water projects. And so that was a neat benefit. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions?
Not a question, but on their website, they have, like, how much it costs. You know, you can donate specifically to a scholarship student, or you can a learning center, or buy bricks, or buy a door, or buy something for the school. And a portion of your church mission giving, the outreach committee always sends a donation to Seeds of Learning every year. So,
yes, thank you.
Not quite sure how to ask this, but what we see on the news about these countries is not like this. where we know there's a lot of, we hear a lot of people leaving.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? Or how does that affect your work? I'm
Yeah.
not sure how to ask the question.
No, that's a
either.
great question. I mean, and over the years too, I mean, I think at some level, without meaning to, but we're trying to make these places be communities where people have opportunities to stay. So I mean, our hope is that if they're living on their land and in a community and they have access to education, that we can help build the community into a place that's how they want it to be. We're very careful about everything from when teenagers go, we say don't flash around your phones because that's more than people make in a year. The cost of a phone is more than people make in a year. So we're careful to try to keep those discrepancies not super visible. And we have had a lot of people ask us, well, could you help me with a visa, or could you help me come here? And while we're sympathetic to it, I mean, as an individual, maybe I'd have a different response, but as an organization, we say, no, we can't get into that, but we will continue to invest in your community. And so that's what we really, and it's a slow road, but we really try to keep that focus. And we have a policy too, called our Soul Seeds of Learning policy on material gifts to individuals, where we ask people not to give material gifts to individuals, because we've seen the back end of it is really divisive, because our staff all live there, and then suddenly, one person we've had, people have wanted to give cameras, and it's like, and this is a great discussion, that we have with the groups. Like, I understand that charity if you don't need the camera, but you give the camera to this kid, and what about everyone other kid? And so we've really tried hard to kind of keep the focus off the material things and keep the focus off of migration too. And so just kind of be present, in these, but it's hard. And we talk with the groups before they go too, of just recognizing that privilege, like if somebody goes and they get really sick, well, they have insurance and they can come back to the States and they can, see their doctor. They do have public healthcare systems there, but the conditions aren't as good. So we try, it's a hard road to navigate, but we try to keep the focus on community building there. Yeah.
So I know you receive money from, church organizations like ours. Do you try to remain pretty much secular, or how does that work? And what about churches that want to give you more and be more involved and more influence your mission and that kind of thing?
We haven't really had that yet. I mean, we have had churches, I think most of the time that people go, like Patrick, who's there, he's inspired kind of in the mission with being part of the Mendocino Presbyterian Church. I think we have had people want to do Bible studies or different things, and we've just played that as it goes. We want to make sure that the community knows that some people are there because they're inspired by, their personal faith, but we have steered away from like distributing Bibles and things. We do distribute school supplies, but we also want people to be able to bring that inspiration, to the project. So for example, a group from a church will in the evening have a reflection. On Sundays they've asked to go to different church services, and we do that, like as part of the itinerary too. But we've tried to, but we did, like in some communities, like there was a community who wanted a church, and the group said, well, could we help them build that? And we said, you can't through us, but we can put you in touch with an organization that you might be able to do that, through. So.
Annie, I just wanted to ask, what do you see as the value of the trips where you bring people from the United States to a country in Latin America? What are the there's probably layers of value, and there's probably also like another, you mentioned the material thing.
Yeah.
There's some slippery slopes, I guess, or some inadvertent colonization kinds of ways of thinking.
Yeah.
So that, I imagine it's tricky, but you've also, you're continuing to maintain bringing people from the United States to countries in Central America to be engaged hands-on in this work is important. And I'm just wondering what you see as the value in that for everybody involved.
I think that's a great question too. And I think, if some people would ask us, well, shouldn't we just pay someone to build the school? And yes, we're not efficient at mixing concrete and laying bricks, but I mean, especially, but it's, and I'll say it's not just the youth, but it's also the adults. I think to go into a different culture for 10 days and have your basic like lodging and food and that stuff taken care of, I think can allow you the chance to really question, you know, things that you take for granted in your own life, and also other people's lives, you know. So I think there's like there's a connection between people that I think is hard to get to, that does happen. So I think especially young people, like, I mean, there are many young people, but and again, it's not only who come back saying, wow, you know, I just didn't even realize how so many people in the world lived, but there's also this this recognition of like material things and power and history. I mean, we had a group in El Salvador one time where during the 1980s, you know, there had been bombs that were dropped, and somebody had one of the men talking to the group had lost his arm, and they had found some bullets, you know, and he said, oh, you know, this was from a such and such U.S., you know, and someone in the group from the States said, how can you sit here and talk to us like that when you know, you lost your arm from this, there's this war and this history? And he said, because you're here now and you're not your government. And so I think the other side of it is people in these countries, in Nicaragua, Guatemala, and El Salvador, they're blown away. When I first told them, when I was working in El Salvador, I said, people pay to come. They were like, no, 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 you're lying. I said, no, people pay to come. And they said, why? Like, you guys are in the States, it's comfortable, why would you want to come? So there's that awe, I think, that people want to come and just learn about and work on your school. And the person was, you know, joking with you. They said, but yeah, it's hot and you're sweaty, you pay to do work. And so there's that reciprocal, you know, realization that like people from the US, which maybe, you know, has less than a stellar history of involvement in some of these countries, of recognizing that, but that's not everybody, you know, and those moments I think are pretty precious to have. And I think, so there's transformation that can happen on both, you know, in both people, both sides.
Yeah. So. Thanks. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Kind of the drop in the bucket question, like, you know, are there, I mean, obviously it's better to do something, but it sort of seems like, you know, 60 people in a country of millions, you know, are there other organizations kind of doing similar work, or is this part of like, I don't know, it's just sort of,
like,
where does one start? I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a hard one. I mean, I know there's another great organization called El Porvenir, which does water and latrine projects and reforestation, that's doing really good work that we have kind of parallel paths with. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really a drop at a time, and I think that sometimes the way that we work is also it's slow, right? Like, we're not just trying to build the school as quickly as we can. So I think the hope, you know, is that little by little in those, you know, 290 communities, that there's been some kind of a change, you know, that we've been able to help to make happen within that. But I think it's one of those things that it's more probably in the process, you know, than in the product. So it's the people who go and their changed idea about those countries and the people there, and then it's those communities as well. But it's you know, it's microcosmic compared to the bigger picture. There are some organizations that are building schools. I mean, the Nicaraguan government is trying to invest more in education, but like when I see it, in the last 30 years, a lot of the conditions in the rural areas are pretty similar still. So, you know, we feel like if we weren't doing some of that, you know, then maybe there wouldn't be a classroom and then a kid wouldn't be going to school. But it's a small, slow process. Yeah.
Tamara has a question.
Okay. What would be like the best way for a young person to get involved within like the organization if they're interested?
That's a great question. So there's anything from actually going on a trip. So that, and I mean, if there were enough interest like down the road, usually it takes a long time to plan, and there was enough people from the church, that would be fantastic. Or helping to raise money for some of the projects. And it wouldn't just be like raising money, but in the process, like learning about, like the students from the scholarship program. Well, who are they? And we try, and this is a little hard for understanding, but we try to not match one person with one student, but rather like, so that there's not kind of a direct charity relationship, but we try to just say, here's all the students in the program, and here's what they do. We can do now with technology. We can do like more, so that there's an exchange also, so that they're learning about it. And then we do walkathons and fundraisers and different things. But we're pretty small still. So if you're interested, definitely let me know, because that would be
Briefly, what's the reaction from, you mentioned the government, but also local officials, and then even locally, like, other dynamics, say, criminal elements? Is everyone just really behind what you guys are doing, or is there some conflict or challenges around that?
So far, we've had really positive responses. We're really, really careful to not be very political, and Nicaragua's gone through some political changes lately. And they've really come down on a lot of the NGOs. And so in Nicaragua, I think over, I want to say 50% of the nonprofit organizations have been shut down by the government, like in the last couple years. Most of them have been human rights organizations, and a lot of Catholic, even some Jesuit. I mean, there's been kind of a crackdown in many ways. We've tried very carefully to not align ourselves anywhere, and we're still operating there. But locally, we have a lot of respect from the Ministry of Education, because they recognize we're helping them out. So everything from when we're going out to a rural community, we have a couple trucks. They'll be like, "Hey, can we get a ride out with you? And could you bring these books out?" So we really try to collaborate and keep our approach humble, so that we don't step on anybody's toes, and go through the process of asking for permission. These last couple years have been really hard, because the requirements by the government now for nonprofits are much more rigid. So we actually had to hire a whole new position for someone to basically turn in paperwork to the government. Like, before you transfer any money, you have to submit a budget as to why you're transferring the money and what it's going to be spent on, and then a follow-up report of how you spent the money, whereas it used to be really easy to do. So, so far we've been okay. Like, people have asked us who have nonprofits, they're like, "How are you guys still open?" And we're still operating, we're still open, but it's been a way trickier scene to navigate in the last couple of years.
And Andrea Ferber went as a teenager with our group, and she couldn't be here today, but it was because of her. She said it was just a life-changing experience for her. It really opened her eyes to so many things about the world, and it was her that, she's part of our outreach committee, that said, we need to have Annie come for Seeds of Learning. So,
well, and we are so, like I said, we're small. Our budget is under $500,000. So we are very grateful for the International Committee, and where there's support for this church. You guys have been incredibly supportive of us, and we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without it. So thank you for that.
If there aren't any other comments or questions, Marta, yeah.
So statewide, it's just me. Yeah, and in Nicaragua, we have 12 staff members, and then one who also travels to Guatemala. So we're pretty small. Yeah.
In 1988, I was in Nicaragua, right at the end of the Sandinista problems, and there was so much hope and so much blabber about what was going to be happening. And as I hear you talking, that has been up with the realities of all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
for kind of trying to illuminate that a little bit.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think I think there's still a lot of hope in the country, and I know one thing I've seen consistently in Nicaragua is there's incredible resilience. So even after, the war or after whatever crisis, people get up and they keep going and they keep trying. And I think that's another thing that people from the States a lot of times have seen and been really inspired by too, is that we don't have anything, but we're going to try and make the best of what we have. So, all right. Well, thank you. for the time.
Thank you. And before you go, yeah, thank you very much. Before you go, I'm just feeling called to ask a prayer of blessing on you and on Seeds of Learning. Will you come here closer to us? And is it okay if I place my hand on your shoulder? God, we are so grateful today to learn from Annie about the really important work of Seeds of Learning. We're so grateful to you for this mission and this project and this organization and the relationship with Community Church. Oh God, when we see images and hear stories like the ones we've heard today, we know that your good news is alive in the world. And so now make us instruments of your peace. May open our hearts to be gracious and to share generously with others. And we ask your blessing, oh God, upon Seeds of Learning, upon Annie and all the people that she works with, and all who are impacted by their work. God, we pray that Seeds of Learning and their work would thrive, would expand in the ways that it needs to expand, would slow down and serve in the ways that it's called to slow down and serve, all to the end that your people would know peace and security and would continue to grow with a sense of promise for the future. It is in Christ's name I ask it. Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.